Hey, welcome everybody to the Leadership Conversation Podcast. I'm your host, Derek, and today I have a very, very special guest, Sergeant Major Cody. We work together at the schoolhouse. She is an amazing leader. Sergeant Major Cody, why don't you say something for the people?
Hey, Sergeant Major Cody here. I call myself your favorite Sergeant Major. I'm the soldier.
Yeah. All right, so I just jumped right into it. So let's talk about your personal journey and your achievements. As you know, we were together on two boards, the Master Instructor Board where we actually evaluated people, and the Instructor Board where you were going to be with your Master Badge. Um, I want you to tell me, being that you got your Master Badge, your Master Instructor Badge, what kind of significant milestone did that create in your life?
You know, the crazy thing about it is that I sat on the first Master Instructor Evaluator Board that 83rd had.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was one of I was about the third most senior instructor.
Okay.
And I sat there and I watched people go through for their boards. I was like, man, okay, this is a pretty phenomenal thing. Had no desire to even earn my master badge because I had instructed previously at Camp Parks, California as a 92 Alpha 10 and 30 level instructor. And
Mm-hmm.
for I was like, okay, cool. I'm not going back to the schoolhouse. Got there and I saw two people didn't make the cut.
Uh-huh.
And I really felt for them, and I felt the need to actually, you know what, let me get my badge so they could, so for lack of better words, see what right looks like. There were some things that those instructors really needed to improve on.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it was humility, actually, and we'll talk a little bit more later.
Oh yeah,
Sure,
for sure.
about humility and what it does for you as a leader. So that was a big deal for me because it's like I'm all about trying to make sure people know what right looks like.
So, so I guess with that being said, can you elaborate a little further on how it essentially shaped your leadership mentality and the way that you teach?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I can remember the morning of the board, right? I'm driving to work, and as I'm heading to work, I'm doing my little meditation, my prayers, and I'm asking, God to, hey, give me the words and so on and so forth. And I was like, man, why me? Why me? Why me? Like, what have I got myself into? Because I don't feel like I do well with boards, to be honest. But I get to the board, and one of the questions was, why should you get the master badge?
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I was like, wait a minute. And I literally said, you probably remember this, why not me?
Yeah.
And it happened to me in that moment. Why not me? Because I've
Yeah.
worked just as hard as everybody else for whatever else they've earned in their career. Why not me? So as I've continued to progress, really from that point and further, I always think, why not me? When things happen, why me? It's why not me? What am I going to learn from it? And when these soldiers come to me, it's not why me? Why not me?
Mhm.
Soldiers
I
come to trust.
I remember when someone asked you that question and you said, "Why not me?" I was ready to fold up my paper. I ain't have no more questions to ask you. I was like, "Oh, she in there." I was like, "She's saying why not her?" That's a mark of a true leader. All right,
Yes.
so look, so I know that so that's the board when you got your badge. But what about you and I sat on the board as board members for those who were going for their master instructor badge? So, um, what was that experience like for you? And do you think that you can kind of elaborate on what kind of traits someone should have when they're seeking a badge or instructor badge or master badge?
Oh my God, absolutely. I think the biggest things for me, and it may sound cliche-ish, but that clear communication, that
Mm-hmm.
communication. If you want to be heard, people need to understand what you're asking, what you're saying. But
Mm-hmm.
as an instructor, as a leader, I'm going to use the leader standpoint. Be as willing to learn as you are to teach.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge thing to when we say lifelong learn. That's a real thing, and as a leader, we be willing to continue to learn. And sometimes we've had people come to those boards, like I know, you have to have the right amount of confidence, not too much, not too
Mm-hmm.
little, like just right.
Yep.
And part of that being on the board, I think you and I are real similar in nature. Like, okay, hey, can I ask you a question? It's gonna be two-part. Take a couple of breaths. You just talking
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes it's overconfidence it's nervousness that's being portrayed as overconfidence.
Yes.
And so it's super important to just be able to have that clear, concise communication when answering the questions for the board. And more importantly, when you're instructing and leading, that you're
Mm-hmm.
clear with what you expect. And lastly, just make sure that, for me, I'm a deliver leader. I make sure that I deliver. And if I can deliver, I let people know that up front.
So I know from having the conversation with you, you have mentioned the words, I'm a lifelong learner, right?
Mhm.
I've heard that, I'm not going to say 1,000 times, but I heard it a lot from you. I'm pretty sure anybody else that's been in your career, that's been in your path in your career has heard it from you too, right? And I think that's one of the great things that I love about you as a Psalm major is that you you have the mentality where you say to yourself, you know what? I don't know everything and I'm always willing to learn more, right?
Right.
I remember when I said something about a book on my social media page, you was like, oh, let me take a look at that. I'm getting there right now. And that's one thing that I appreciate with somebody of any rank, right?
Mhm.
Because so many times we get to a position where we feel like we know everything, especially as sergeant. Like you can't go no higher,
Right.
right? So, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn anything else.
Right.
So that's one thing that I've always appreciated about you as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Something that somebody else can appreciate. I know that a lot of people know you from being a master leader instructor and when you were at the 83rd. So during the master leader course, can you tell me what kind of, like, what did it mean to you to teach other guys who were aspiring to be master sergeant? Like what kind of feeling did that evoke for you?
Oh my goodness. Now I would have to say, when I first got there, came into a rough team, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times your environment will kind of dictate your motivation. And for me, because it was my second instructor assignment, wasn't too enthused about it. It's not what I
Uh-huh.
asked for. My talent manager, I went through like 3 talent managers before I even got there, so I was a little perturbed about that. But then once I got there, I had a rough environment, and my biggest thing, you heard this saying, leave it better than you found it.
Yes.
So it took me about 6 to 8 months to really kind of get myself together because I was coming back from a deployment to Afghanistan. I'm coming in post COVID. Also, this is fun. And what I ended up doing was I was like, hey, I presented some things to my leaders, some problems, but hey, here's some solutions, right? And I was able to actually build my team from scratch. Like I handpicked all of my people. And it meant the world to me because I was able to literally come in and truly be able to affect change, and then see the growth of the instructors that I had, plus the students. Man, it's phenomenal to be teaching at the senior level because you're
Oh
talking about
yeah.
seasoned. You're talking about, I think I might have had the youngest E7 I had 13 years.
Wow.
And he might have been 29, 29,
Oh,
30.
okay.
The oldest I had might have been right at 57, 57, 58, because he was National Guard. So that was the oldest one I had, talking about 30 plus years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So what I will say, oh, I loved it, but I was scared every class because I
Why
was
is that?
like, what is it I'm not going to know that they do know? But I
Oh
had
yeah, yeah.
lifelong learner.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to go into it and be like, hey, I'm here for you. I want to learn from you. I'm here just to facilitate discussion. It's your class. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Actually, is the whole point of the new education system, the new NCOES, is that it focuses more on it's learner centric and not me being more of a teacher, which is why we say we're instructors. We're just facilitators. And so it had to be, it was, I had a favorite assignment before this one, but now that was by far my best experience as a senior leader. I absolutely loved it, but I was afraid every single class, and I brought 300 to 500 students through MLC. And that's not, again, and I also taught with the Company Commander First Sergeant's course. I was a victim advocate, so I taught the sharp portion of that as well. So you got the first sergeants that you're impacting. And so I was super enthused about that too, because that was a big deal. And the staff for that course used to always introduce me as a sergeant major. I was like, I'm not there yet. I'm still working.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Get pressure on me though.
Mm-hmm. I think that's pretty amazing because when you're sitting in front of the class, when you're in front of the classroom, I know for me, when I was sitting in front of the classroom, they look at you with so much like enthusiasm or whatever. And just like you mentioned, you were, scared every day because you got people that's been in the army for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And you always have to say to yourself, for me, I was more so like, well, I wonder what is it that I can teach this person that they don't know. And on
Yeah.
the flip side, I want to know what they can teach me, you
Right.
know? Because like you said, your words, lifelong learner. All
Mm-hmm.
right. Well, speaking of the people that's been in MLC, what do you think is the biggest takeaway that someone who attends MLC can learn?
Okay, so I'm laughing because as MLC changed, it changed about 3 or 4 times, right? And one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I would see on our after class comments on AAR was like, "Oh, I didn't learn anything from the course. It didn't teach me how to be a first sergeant, right?" And I'm like, "All right, cool." But to me, the biggest takeaway is some of that came from the fact that it was a different style of learning. It was uncomfortable. It
Mm-hmm.
was super taxing. Even though we were in a low threat environment, your
Mm-hmm.
mind was being challenged constantly with what we don't normally do in the Army, which is writing.
Yeah.
So the key takeaway, I used to always bring up, how many of you have had an evaluation that was poorly written? So if you think you're not walking away with, something from the class, it is that seeing the new learning style, for those that have been in for a while, also taking away that your writing and your speech and your communication does matter because words do matter.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, making sure that when they walk away, they understand that they still have made it to a certain level. You
Yeah.
have had been to BOC, AOC, SOC. So I always make sure I remind them that when you go back to your formations, don't be hoarders of the information that you have.
Yeah.
We had a slide that we showed in the beginning of class, and it talked about the 2020 2040 learning strategy and how BOC and everything shifts all the way to Sergeant Major's course. And I always tell them, hey, you're now going to shape the future of the Army. So take it back and train down to the lowest level, to the most junior soldier.
Okay. I like that. Those are good takeaways for anybody. So if anybody that's listening to you trying to go to MLC, you should pay attention to those words and understand that, writing is a big part. And I think by explaining to them, like, hey, have you ever had an NCO year that was poorly written is a really, really good point to put out to them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I can say this about you. The day that I've met you, you've had this, which you spoke on initially, this humility about yourself, like this humble approach, right? And I think part of that humility is when you say things like, oh, I'm a lifelong learner, or what can I learn from somebody, and I know that a lot of people really, really appreciate that. So can you kind of explain in your own words, where did you get this humble attitude from that shaped you into the leader that you are?
Well, I would have to say I got it from being disappointed as a junior soldier.
Ah,
Um, you have to, at this level, including yourself. I mean, you retired as a master sergeant.
mm-hmm.
You need it.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. I mean, so for me, I've definitely remained humble because there were people that I believed in wholeheartedly that were
Mm-hmm.
seniors, and they failed me in some sort, or disappointed me, or didn't come through, and I was like, man, we tell ourselves, oh, I'd never be that way, and then when it's
Yeah.
time to adhere to you will never be that way, we
Mm-hmm.
forget. And so for me, the job is never done. It's
Mm-hmm.
never done. It's always work to do. So for me, and I also feel that any time, in any instance, everything I have can be taken from me at any time. So I treat it, with great respect and dignity because it took work to get there, but it doesn't take much to lose it. So when you're
That's
dealing
true.
with people, you have to be humble and you have to be self-aware. And so that's a big deal for me. So, but because I brought up self-awareness, and I bring it up in a sense of, if you're not self-aware, you have those blind spots, right?
Exactly.
And when you don't recognize those blind spots, just like driving a car, you have to be vigilant. You got to be, constantly paying attention. And when you get ready to make that, get in that right lane from the left lane, you're looking for that blind, making sure you're looking in your blind spot, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a leader. Those blind spots are sometimes those junior soldiers, those ones that we're not technically at the same level with because we've gotten promoted and we've moved on up. But you have to really consider how your leadership will affect those you're actually leading.
Mm-hmm.
Which pushes me to my final point on my humble approach is emotional intelligence.
Yes.
So what does that mean? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
intelligence mean? It means, really knowing how to react in certain situations. Are you upset? More than likely, absolutely. However, how we respond outwardly is so important because people are always watching when you get to this level.
Yep. Even when you think they're not, they're always watching you.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the good points that you brought up is essentially like being a leader that you wanted, right? Because we've been in the Army for a while, and I know that we know some of the same people from the
Mm-hmm.
military,
Mm-hmm.
and your reputation will lead. Your reputation, precedes you before you get there, right? And we've been around situations before. I can remember when I first applied for the AGR tour. One of the master sergeant at the time, Master Sergeant Reed, was talking to me. And he was like, "Oh, I know you're a mechanic, but I know your MOS is a mechanic, but I didn't know you actually know how to fix stuff." I was like, "Yeah, man." I was like, "Oh, I'm a country boy." I was like, "I'm from Mississippi." I was like, we was brought up to learn how to fix things."
Yeah.
And he started talking to me. He was saying like, "Oh, I want to bring you on the orders," and then he asked me to get on the AGR tour. And I was like, "What's that?" And he told me, he explained to me about it. I put in for the AGR tour back then, just like I was saying in the last podcast. I had to mail the package off, right? To show
Right.
you how long. To show you how long I've been on the AGR tour, right? I had to mail the package off, got accepted. Then once I got accepted, I was just so ecstatic about, being able to like do something. And you know what he said to me? He was like, "You should do for somebody else what I did for you."
Pay it forward.
He was like, "Make sure you give it back."
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. All right. So Louisiana, the boot, right?
Hey,
That's what y'all call it.
that's what we call it, the move, right?
How you feel now that you're back in Louisiana?
Man, look, it's been surreal actually because I've been gone for some time. I was here a couple years ago and then I deployed while being here.
Mm-hmm.
I left and came to Kentucky. But being back home, what I will say from being on the West Coast, being on the East Coast, when you're back in your atmosphere, not just your state, but in the South, because we're from the South,
Yes, sir.
a different type of feel. But also it's more pressure too.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've been some places, we've done some things, and it's a culture versus climate. It's a battle, to be honest, being back home, because culture is gonna always be there,
That's
always.
true.
And then when you get home, it's like making sure that once you get in the atmosphere that, 'cause we are who we are deep down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And although I'm a sergeant major, I'm from Louisiana, I'm country, there's certain
Mm.
things I like, but at the end of the day, I'm a sergeant major too. And so I
When
gotta have
I,
balance.
you, when you first came to the schoolhouse, I forgot what it was, but I want to say it was a petty activity. And I heard you talking, and I was like, "Where did that song from?" I said, "I bet you she a cousin or something." I said, "I bet you she's in a different state that's close to me," and,
Yeah.
and I like that. Well,
But I'm
so
pardon me. The other piece to that I want to say, and I think you and I can both relate,
mhm,
saying of wherever I go, but more importantly, being back home, I bloom where I'm planted.
I
Yeah, I'm
like
back,
that.
but at the same time, this is just me being able to sprinkle some of what I've learned and what I've gained back into, those that come from what I come from.
I think that's an amazing philosophy. So, being that you and I are from the South, I know that when I first left for basic training at AIT, I would hear it all the time, like, "Oh, don't call me sir, don't call me ma'am. I work for a living." I was like, "What do you mean?" It's like I was brought up in the South. I was taught to be respectful. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. Uh, a lot of things that I have from my upbringing, as far as like my generosity, how I lead, and how I train, and how I talk to people, came a lot from where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
My question to you is that: is there any specific what's the word I'm looking for? Are there any specific cultural experiences that shape the way that you lead soldiers as a sergeant major or as a master sergeant?
Hmm. Absolutely. Like you kind of touched on it already, like that Southern hospitality. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
you said it, just how you care about people and, wanting to make sure that they're okay. The respect, when you say yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, it's a respect thing. We just
Mm-hmm.
brought up, but for me, it's a heavy emphasis on, instead of, we use the word in the Army as family, 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 but I think what we need to put more emphasis on, because we are a professional organization, is team building.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
I must put, what's family to me on the civilian side, or personal side, I come in the door as a leader worried about team building, because team building is super important. And a lot of times you navigate to the family atmosphere, but if you have to build a team, because in building a team, you create the respect within the ranks, but you
Mm-hmm.
also have a team that's going to come, a team of members of the team who are willing to come to you with their issues, personal matters. What's my career progression looking like? Hey, I'm not
Right.
feeling it today. And they understand, because for me, like I said, Southern hospitality, it equals a level of compassion too,
Mm-hmm.
because we're from the South, so we're firm. but at the same time, we're compassionate. I mean, you and I both know the South has not been the leader in education, has not
Right.
been the leader in growth, in jobs. We're more so below the poverty line. If you're more like below the poverty line, if you're from the South, these are common things that you can research and they'll come up. So a lot of us that, come from the South, not all, but a lot of us really value those opportunities external from home. But the Southern hospitality stays within you because it made you. It
Mm-hmm.
helped you as the person that you are. The other thing, but not the least, approachability.
Mm-hmm.
Are you approachable? Where are you going to go in the South? They're not going to hold the door and say, "Hey, how are you? How your mom and them doing?
Yep.
How you,
Exactly.
oh, you so and so son?" Absolutely, and
Yep.
that's you. You get so. Are you so and so's daughter? Either it's because you're doing good or because you're misbehaving.
Yep.
Inapproachable. Everybody knows everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big deal in the South because we do work on that whole family focus, and sometimes from the South, other places experiences too, the dysfunction.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Army is just this melting pot of people from all over the place, and sometimes we're not as functional as we should be because we are brought up and brought through training to be able to make sense of something that doesn't make sense, or make something that's functional that is dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, a lot of those different upbringings, negative and positive, have shaped me into the type of leader I am because it's from personal experience.
Oh yeah, I hear that. So I can remember, and I want to touch on one thing that I'm pretty sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. But I remember when I was young, and yeah, it was really hot. I was in the country, Greenwood, Mississippi, North Mississippi, and it was so hot outside. I was riding my bike. I was pulling my lawnmower with my belt. I had my shirt off, and then my pants were sagging to the point where you can see my
Mm.
what my grandmother called my britches. I had my aunt pull beside me, and she fussed me out. And she was like, "What are you doing out here? Your pants are below." And I was like, "Hey, I'm just using my belt to pull my lawnmower. I'm trying to make some money." And she gave me a whooping. My other family member who stays, so all of my family members stay on the same road, right? So she gave me a whooping. I got fussed out by my aunt next door. I had another uncle. Then I went down to my other auntie house, and I all got fussed out. And I was like, "Man, I ain't never got so many spankings in one day by so many different people." And
Right.
I think a part of Southern hospitality, Southern tradition is where you have somebody who's going to look out for your best interest, right? And I think that goes along with how you are in the Army. Because just because we are, so let's just say, for instance, we're in the same unit, but we have different platoons. It doesn't necessarily mean that I can't fuss your soldier out or I can't correct them on something because I know you. I say, hey, you saw Major Cody soldier, or you my son Cody soldier, whatever the case. I know you. You better get your stuff straight, man, before I let it know. And
Right.
I think that's a big part. So I know for me that's one of the things that I carry into my professional career, my military career that I got from the South.
Right.
I, as I mentioned earlier, all right, moving on to the next one. I love your straightforward, no nonsense approach on how you view leadership. I remember there's a situation where you had a soldier that was coming to MLC. He was like, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit about this soldier?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I told you, and then afterwards, he was like, "Hey, I appreciate you for giving me a good word. She fits right in. She's good. We make a good team."
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, is there any time that your straightforward leadership or your straightforward attitude didn't go over so well with a troop? And if it did, could you elaborate on it? You don't have to mention names or anything like that, but can you elaborate on it and tell me what happened?
So what I mentioned is, and it happened to be, most of my experiences with my approaches not going well has been as a senior leader, and
Mm-hmm.
mostly while I was instructor for MLC, right? Because again, as we mentioned earlier, we're dealing with seasoned leaders.
Mm-hmm.
So I had an instructor attend MLC, and bottom line was they play. Let's put it that way. It's not an uncommon practice. It's just a matter of when you're going to get called. We do a lot of writing, and everybody wants to figure out, Chat GPT or what's the way to get around it, right?
All right.
My regard for this soldier was much higher because they were an instructor themselves.
See.
So my approach was, hey, you plagiarized. Here's the documents that show that you did XYZ. I'm definitely disappointed. However, these are your options. With the first one being that you are going to be recommended. Now, we all know that accountability is a huge thing in the military, right? our upbringing, it comes out often in military settings. Well, this soldier basically hit me with, I would never do X, Y. I would never plagiarize. I'm an instructor myself. It was like all the extra attitude and privilege and entitlement simply because you're an instructor. But I had to remind, you're a student right now.
Yeah.
You're not an instructor. My job is to uphold the standards. So it did not go over well with her, and it resulted in some other subsequent actions that did not materialize, thankfully. But it was not taken very well when I was like, hey, my standards for you are much higher. You did this. This is going to be what the outcome is. Hey, you have your options afforded to you per doctrine, but this is my recommendation.
Got it. Okay. Um, you are a sergeant major, as I mentioned. So do you know how far you are away from hanging the boots up and
Mm.
maybe getting another career or something like that?
What I am gonna say is I think I'm in a pretty sweet spot. I'm already a sergeant major, so I'm working on, my 3 years to hit the high three. So I'm gonna say 3 to 5. We just had the CSL board happen in August, so if I make CSM, that'll give me a couple of years there, but that more than likely will be it for me. So I'm gonna say 3 to 5 years. If I don't make CSM this go around, then I will more than likely go ahead and put in for retirement.
Okay. I speak to my son a lot about legacy. I'm pretty sure, as you know, my son is in the military now. He's stationed out in Fort Carson. We speak all the time.
Mhm.
And some of the things that I mentioned to him is like, hey man, uh, I don't want to, I don't want to make this life easy for you. I was like, I just want to prepare you for the life that's going to be ahead. I was
Mhm.
like, I've been in the military for 20 some years. I was like, I'm a master sergeant, but I'm also your dad. And I was like, the legacy that when I leave this earth and when I leave the military, when I'm no longer your father, I was like, my legacy is something that you can carry on
Right.
forever. With that being said, your legacy as a soldier, as a master sergeant, what do you feel like? What do you feel like your legacy, or what do you want your legacy to be once you call it quits?
So the most important thing to me, the most important thing besides God are my 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
They're 17, 11, 9, and 8.
Mm-hmm.
Different stages of life, right? And I am an advocate for being a servant. And so I teach my kids often about serving others prepares you to lead others. You're in a leadership role or not, people are looking at you and they're like, man, if they can do it, I can do it. So sometimes you're leading, inadvertently, and that's important. So I want my legacy to always be a legacy of servanthood,
Mm-hmm.
uh, about other people, because you take care of your people, they'll take care of you in return.
I do believe that. So I was going to ask you about a quote that you have that kind of encapsulates what you just said, but what's the quote again that you just said? Serving others.
Oh well, that's one of the ones. One of my philosophies is serving others prepares you to lead. But one of my big ones, I have it actually I have my own coin, and it says on there, my servant leadership will precede your followership.
Ah, I love that.
So very, very, I consider myself a servant leader. I try to make sure that's what I look like when I'm seeing that. Hey, I'm trying to figure out what I can do for you, even if it's a smile, a calm, my calmness, a kind word, asking about your family, everything to me, especially in the role that I'm in and have been in the past about 5 to 7 years. It's been so clear to me about being a servant.
Yes. Let me ask you this about switching to something else, lesson learned, right? So we talk about lesson learned.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's almost a guarantee that you're gonna have trouble, whether or not you go looking for it or it's gonna come find you or whatever the case is. You have had a outstanding career. It's pretty diverse. You've been in different areas. Like I said, you're from Louisiana. You've been back around. Is there any type of lesson that you learned that you feel like is crucial for other soldiers to learn? And before I get into it, I know that I mention to my son all the time, like, look, I like a smart man learns from his mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
but a smarter man learns from the mistakes of others.
Right.
So if you could share one lesson that you learned from your entire diverse career, what would it be?
Well, I will say this now. I'm fortunate to say I haven't ever had this mentality, but dimming somebody else's light will not make yours shine brighter.
Ooh, man,
Having
say.
mentality is not going to, I mean, even if it does look like you're advancing, you're
Mm-hmm.
it hadn't caught up with you.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I've seen it. I may not have been a part of it, but I've seen it. And what I will say that I have been guilty of is that when I could have said something to those who were trying to hurt others, I didn't know any better. I didn't even have
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't that developed of a leader to actually be able to say anything. But as I got a mentor, several mentors, as I started getting guidance, and the great Master Sergeant Trong, actually, Trong,
Look, shout out to my son Tron.
that's the big dog right there. She does not care about soldiers, and she was the one who I heard say, "Hey, dim somebody else's light, like I'll make yours shining brighter." And I heard that from her a couple of years ago. I just didn't
Mm-hmm.
know words, but I've used those words since, and that's actually on the other side of my coin is that, but that's the impact that she had on me, whether she knows it or not.
Oh yeah,
Um, as a seasoned leader now, the other thing is I hear people all the time, leaders, senior leaders, tell soldiers how they work, the soldiers work for them. Nah, it's not like that. You actually work for the soldiers. We're charged as we continue to progress and promote to actually advocate for those we're leading, which means we have to know who we work for. If we didn't have soldiers, we wouldn't have a job.
that's true.
Who are you making changes for? Because you're not
Mm-hmm.
always be the one who's in that leadership role. So you have to work for them and advocate for them, because that's going to be that's going to be the you later. So the other thing is my military sense for sure is that soldiers don't work for me. I work for them.
Yeah. One of the things and I mention my son often because I guess he kind of follows in my footsteps or whatever. We talk, and when I ask him often, like, "Hey man, what is it about me that you can say is one of your fondest memories?" Niggas like, "Dad, it's not like the football games or the basketball games." So he says it's those times that we spend together.
Mm.
And he was like, I remember, so I still play basketball, but look, these army knees, they are not what they used to be. So, but I still get out there on the court and I pop me some anti-inflammatory medicine. I run up and down the court with him a couple times. But he was like, "Dad, those are my favorite times." So he was like, "Why you do it?" And I was like, "Oh man, it's for you." I was like, "I'm not going to the league." I said, "But I know that you enjoy being with me." I said, "Just as much as I enjoy being with you." So I really love that. I
Mm-hmm.
really love the fact that you say that you're going to work for the soldiers. Uh, Future leaders. What kind of advice do you have for aspiring leaders?
Okay, so big one for me. And I apply this to my kids and my family too, because when you say leaders, and we use the word, and it sounds like all they talk about is leadership, leader, leader, leader. But just as a
Mm-hmm.
general, each person that you meet, every path that you cross, needs to birth, an understanding of what you do and how it's going to affect others. So clearly put, leadership is born from you taking in how it's going to affect those that you're actually leading. Will it be well received? I mean, if you look around the army in general, we've had so many changes because the generations, our newer generation, so some of the old things didn't work for them. Or more personally put, we're parents
Mm-hmm.
and we have multiple children. Each child is parented different. You're fair with your children, but what this child needs is not what this other child needs. And so you
Yep.
have your leadership births different things in different people. And we can't approach leadership or approach people with a one size fit all mentality.
So
Um,
I agree with that. I mentioned there's something about like a ripple effect.
mhm.
And when I talk to soldiers nowadays, they would say, "Oh well, do you have a problem with this person?" I was like, "I don't got a problem with nobody." And I was like, "Oh, you just everybody get along with you." And I said, "That's not it." I was like, "Look, man." I was like, in an organization, there's almost guaranteed that you're gonna have some type of strife, some type of whatever. I was like, but my advice for you, and I know I cut you off, and I'll let you get back
No,
to
you
it,
good.
but I was like, my advice for you is that you can affect change where you can affect change. If you have somebody that's in your direct line of supervision, or even if they're not, but if you can share your knowledge with them, your expertise, your experience, your history of the military, you can affect that person. And eventually that person's going to grow up and they're going to leave your unit and they're going to go to another unit. But everything that you taught them is going to stay with that person. And they're going to do the same thing at that other unit. And they're going to influence somebody else just like you influence them. And what it does is it creates a ripple effect throughout the whole entire organization.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny that you said that, because for me, I mean, obviously I'm in the Army, you know, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a member of the Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated.
Mm-hmm.
We're definitely about sisterhood, leadership, and servanthood, right? And so I tell people, if you can master being a servant leader, that does a lot. Because especially the more responsibility you have, it changes you, because now it's
Yeah.
not you, because you have been promoted into certain positions, right? So what I would like to share as another piece of advice to future leaders is, rarely do servant leaders dictate to the team. They are there to facilitate discussion and participation to ignite innovative ideas.
Wait, say that one
Oh,
more time.
I knew you would
I
do.
I love the way it sounds. Say it one more time. Because
I'm
it sounds so good just rolling off.
somewhat of a poet, you know.
Yeah. Let's say
So
it. Say it one more time. I want to hear it one more time.
the way it goes is rarely do servant leaders
Mm-hmm.
dictate the team. They're there to facilitate discussion and encourage participation for innovative ideas.
Man, it's so good.
So,
That's
and
so good.
that's the one thing I can say about when I organize, just bringing back up the MLC team and other teams that I've organized and facilitated, is that I ask them all the time, hey, tell me what it is. No limits, you know, no left and right. Hey, just give me the wildest thing that you think we could do to make, you know, our team great. Because I always start with the team first. Because once we go out, we're going to be a unified front. But think about it. I didn't tell them, hey, this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I asked them, hey, what do y'all want to do? Because they
Yeah.
want to do it, and you actually encourage it and support it. Do you know the type of team that you would have, because they actually see and that you actually understand them, you're recognizing their strengths? I mean, on my team for MLC, I was the next to the youngest. So I was next to the youngest of all five of my members, but I was actually the senior. I was in charge.
Right.
So you got to think, a lot of respect has to be garnered to people, because their experiences shape them.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to definitely pay some homage to Master Sergeant Kelvin Fortunato. He's one of the 92 Foxes. Super outstanding leader. I worked with him previously in California. Master Sergeant Adriana Barrera.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely love her. She was my right hand. She really got me through, and just be able to take in what they thought, what their ideas were. So when I left MLC and I left it in her hands, I have not heard not one bad thing.
Yeah.
You know, because they're still, again, being a servant leader. What do y'all want to do? And they
Yeah.
carry and say, oh, I'm not going to. They didn't, when I left, it was like, oh, I can't wait till she leaves. It was like, man,
Mm-hmm.
it was more so, when she leaves, we still got it. And they're holding down the fort. And I love that for them.
And that's a little bit of that ripple effect that I was just talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like leaders don't create followers; they create other leaders, right?
that.
And I love that. Don't make me say that one
It's
again.
empowering. What I hear
Yeah.
is empowering, and that's a big deal. And we empower people around us, you know, with the slightest just level of respect given to them. Junior soldiers, particularly, those
Mm-hmm.
soldiers are pretty much willing to do whatever it takes to make things successful if they know that you have their back. Or, because I'm a firm leader, I'm very compassionate. However, I'm firm. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
tell soldiers, hey, I'm not playing with you today. You need to get it together. And they know when I say that, they're like, yes, I'm not playing. It's not like, oh, she has an attitude, or you know, she's out to get me. It's like, no, Sergeant Major cares, and she's telling me because she cares. And I'm proud to know that my soldiers receive, you know, me actually chastising them in that manner, and not that I'm out to get them, because I do care.
That's what's up. You have dropped some, man. I don't want to say bombs, but you dropped some knowledge in this podcast. My last one, and I know you've had about 5 or 6 courses that I can probably write down. But do you have a favorite leadership quote or a book that is essential for a leader that's under your command or anywhere else, and that you can share with us?
Oh my goodness, yeah, I do have one. You mentioned earlier about the influence, like influence and the ripple effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
obviously being a master sergeant and, and now a sergeant major, I have learned the amount of authority that I really have. So can I make you do something by virtue of authority? Absolutely. But do I want to have you do it under my authority? Or do I want to basically say, hey, the key to successful leadership today is my influence, not my authority. If I can influence you, if I can persuade us to be on the same page or you to share an idea with me, my authority is not, I don't have to even use it. So the key to successful leadership is your influence, not your authority.
Man, I love it.
So
I
that
love it.
I'm all about the quotes.
Yeah.
So and
Look, you didn't gave me some. You gave me a lot.
so look, I'm gonna have to use it as an advertising play. Hey, 377 TSC down in Belle Chase, New Orleans, Louisiana. We need you. I'm there. I want great soldiers, new soldiers, here to bridge the gap. It's a huge command, units everywhere. We're about 32,000 strong. I am loving the atmosphere, very high up tempo. Hard to not have anything to do. So if you're interested, please reach out to me. First name Deanna, DEANNA.H as in hotel .Cody .mil at army.mil.
Got it. You heard it here first. Anything else you would like to share to the listeners?
Man, just go out, do great things. Make sure you prioritize self-care and your family, and everything else will follow. We all gotta hang up our uniform one day.
That's true.
Make it
All right.
count.
All right, everybody. That was Sergeant Major Cody. All right, you listen to the Leadership Podcast. Tune in next week. Another guest. Out.